Good afternoon, good
Recording has
morning,
started.
good morning, good afternoon, good evening to governance professionals, company secretaries, chartered secretaries, whatever is the name, the flag bearers of the governance, to all of you all across the globe. Good afternoon from India. I am Ranjit Pandey, CS Ranjit Pandey, immediate past president of ICSI and Vice President Corporate Secretary International Association, welcoming you all to this international webinar. And theme for today's webinar is Convergence and Divergence of Role of Corporate Secretaries in Various Jurisdictions. As the topic or theme suggests, that we are going to discuss the role of the corporate secretaries in different jurisdictions. We have very eminent panelists today, and everyone is carrying the vast experience in the field of corporate governance and representing their country. So we are going to have a very good discussion and way forward for the corporate governance framework in the world. And CSIA is the flag bearer. It is taking the initiative. This webinar is organized by the CSIA and duly supported by the ICSI. So first of all, I would like to invite Karen Southgate, President CSIA, to share her thoughts and vision about the CSIA and talk something about this webinar, and thereafter we will move forward. Karen.
Many thanks, Ranjit, and thank you once again for being our esteemed moderator, a job that you always manage to do so well for CSIA. So firstly, many thanks to you. To the rest of the panelists and all our participants, welcome today from your various time zones around the world. As Ranjit has mentioned, this is a CSIA co-hosted event with ICSI. And the topic today really, as you will see as the day goes on, is reflective of a report that we sent out or we launched in 2020, which was our CSIA Global Thought Leadership Report on the comparative analysis of company secretaries around the world. So if you haven't already had that report, you're welcome to look at it on our website or email us for a copy if you can't find one. But your feedback today on this webinar will obviously give us some insights as to whether the other areas of the report, which we won't manage to cover today in the short time that we have, will possibly be of further interest to the participants. So this could be the first of a Part 2 series or a Part 3 series, even in 2021, where we managed to cover other areas of that extensive thought leadership report. So thank you again to everybody for joining. What you will notice, and Ranjit, if you don't mind, I'm just going to share the screen quickly so I can show members a little bit about CSIA.
Yes, please.
Give me 1 second. So you will see we are currently 14 national bodies, and in fact, as of late last week, we are now officially 50 national bodies. So welcome to Dubai, who is our new member as at the end of 2020, and obviously going forward into 2021. So we look forward to a bit more global collaboration as well with Dubai and their members. We represent over 100,000 corporate secretaries and governance professionals in more than 100 or now 101 countries throughout the world. So as you can see, a large reach and lots of opportunities for knowledge sharing. So currently our full members are, as you can see on the screen, I'm not going to repeat them all for you and waste your time, but you can see we have a nice range of full members as well as affiliate members, all making up the 15 members now of the CSIA. So what do we do? And in general, our mission or purpose is really to be the global voice of corporate governance. And what that entails is ensuring that there is a professional status and recognition of the industry, as well as the members and participants within that industry. So our key focus areas a lot of the time include thought leadership, which is how I said this paper came about and of course has led to our webinar today. It also involves more interesting webinar topics, which we've managed to do in 2020. And through our 10th anniversary year, which was this year, we've had a great brand refresh as well as instituting new websites and platforms. So if you're not currently yet following us on social media, please go and do so both on LinkedIn as well as on Facebook. You'll see you can get involved on our Facebook page as well as on our blogs and forums on the website. So there's many opportunities if you haven't yet started collaborating with the CSIA to get involved. if you have a look, what we'll see in this slide is it gives us various reasons as to why it would benefit you to join the CSIA. As you can see, there's various amounts of knowledge sharing that would happen amongst our 100 countries. And within that, we managed to have benchmarking of tools as well as training, put together lots of best practice notes, because obviously, as you will see, with the wide range of skills as well as legal instances in different countries, we come across different scenarios, which we can then collaborate with and obviously come out with best practice. If you would like to get involved a little bit further, we can also involve you further with video snippets. So anybody who has any content feedback, any proposals or any paper contributions, we are always open to new ideas. CSIA is always growing and always keen to involve new people. So there's also a couple of member conferences still coming up for the rest of the year. We have not only Kenya, but I think also Malaysia still hosting their conferences, so you can find out some more information about those. Apart from that, I think over to you, Ranjit, and just once again, thank you to the ICSI for being our co-host and generously sharing your platform. And then, of course, to each of our panelists who brings a unique aspect to each of this report that we're going to be discussing today. So thank you to everybody for giving up your precious time and joining us. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Karen. Now I'm going ahead and inviting President ICSI, who is going to be the President of Corporate Secretary International Association also from the 1st of January. So President-elect, Mr. Ashish Garg, to share the vision of ICSI and what is the way forward for the CSIA also. Mr. Ashish Garg, please.
Thank you so much, Ranjit. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends. It is always heartening to share the space with our professional friends and colleagues from across the globe. The thoughts shared during our discussions and deliberations leave me with not just food for thought, but also with a renewed zeal to serve our institution, our members, our stakeholders, as well as our global counterparts. We are all governed by the company law or corporate laws of our land. We are all bestowed with the responsibilities of maintaining and upholding the governance structure in corporates of our land. We are all expected to perform similar functions as regards boards and other stakeholders. And we all are having dedicated institutions or organizations to develop the profession and provide it a better stature. All these facts and factors and plenty more, somehow knowingly or unknowingly, coverage the profession of company secretaries, irrespective of the name by which they are called. That is, whether they are called secretary, corporate secretary, or company secretary or governance professional, irrespective of the Companies Act or corporate governance code applicable to their land, and irrespective of their jurisdiction, country, or continent. It is the mutual feeling and common goal to serve our nations and to solidify the governance structures in our corporates that binds us with a common thread and bring out the right connection. A very simple reiteration of this convergence is visible in the fact that our deliberations, our discussions, seminars, conferences, and summits are all focused upon finding common grounds, pondering our common issues, and even further finding solutions which fit aptly with all of them. It is only yesterday that I was going through the responsibilities endowed upon company secretaries and corporate secretaries, as many of us would call it, and it did not surprise me at all to read through heaps only to find that, be it the board of directors, be it the regulatory authorities, be it the investors, or be it the other stakeholders, the expectations from CS remain the same. We are expected to guide the board, report threats and failures, certify documents, and ensuring that they reach the regulatory authorities in time and plenty more. Be it UK, USA, Singapore, South Africa, Australia, or India or any other country. By far, the broad roles of company secretaries are by and large similar on the variety of fronts. To me, it seems that there is more convergence or less of divergence, that while there may be a few nations where the additional roles played by company secretaries over time may differ, but the broad role played by company secretaries seem to align at much deeper levels that is visible on the surface, and more to say, like the tip of the iceberg. Even further, the situations posed by the pandemic find us facing common challenges, and believe their solutions to converge, as well as for I believe that it is the combined efforts on the part of all of us, the professionals and professional institutions, that shall lead our nations on the path of recovery and higher above on the growth trajectory. I must compliment the existing office bearers of the CSIA, President Karen, Vice President Ranjit, and all the team members to have the highest number of webinars in the history of CSIA so far. And I hope that with the support of all of you, we'll do the more things, more innovations in 2021 also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ashish, for your wonderful thought. And Ashish is leading the institution with the motto Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara, speak the truth, avoid the law. And ICSI is committed to its vision to be the global leader in promoting good corporate governance. So corporate governance is our vision also, and CSIA vision also. So it's a very good combination and collaboration between the two organizations. So moving forward, I will now go to all the panelists one by one, and they will share about what governance professionals and what corporate governance structure is there in their country. And it will be a very brief introduction, and thereafter it will be followed by one presentation and then question answer. So this is the sequence of event. For the benefit of audience, I am sharing this. So I will go first with Mr. Bode Okayu, President ICSAN, Kenya, Nigeria. So Bode, over to you, and please share your thoughts about the governance in your country, your say subcontinent or continent, and also about the role of the charter secretary, corporate secretaries in your jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you, Karen, the president, Ashish. Also, thank you, and other panelists. It is my pleasure to be here today. And briefly, I will share with you the role of company secretary, the evolution in Nigeria. Actually, it started by statutory recognition in our local laws, that is the Companies Act. And the recognition started in 1990 when we had the Companies and Allied Matters Act, which provides that all companies must have a company secretary. That is, whether private or public, it was mandatory. I use was because I will explain the reason. Mandatory for them to have. And you just find that because the role was just evolving then, only 4 duties were stated in the Act, and all the 4 duties were basically secretarial duties, attending meetings, keeping records, filing returns, and also other secretarial matters. No specific governance rule, because at that particular time, the issue of corporate governance was relatively unknown. And apart from that, in 2003, that was when we had our first code of corporate governance. And I was not surprised also, there was no mention of company secretary in that particular code of corporate governance in Nigeria. So it means that company secretary, the role was limited to the 4 secretarial duties recognized by the Companies Act in 1990. However, the expansion started first in 2011 when the Secretaries and Exchange Commission issued its code of corporate governance. And in that particular provision, in that particular code, it provides for the mode of appointment of a company secretary, that it must be a very rigorous rule, and it must follow the same procedure for the recruitment of a director. And specifically, a governance rule was reserved for the company secretary. That is, he should be a central source of advice to the board on ethics, conflict of interest, and good governance. That was the first time we had a specific mention of corporate governance as part of the responsibilities of the company secretary in Nigeria. However, the recent national code, we unified our code in 2018, and the recent code of 2018, which is called the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance 2018, we now have very expansive rule for company secretary in terms of governance. The focus has moved beyond secretarial duties to that of governance. So it talks about the qualification of the company secretary, the status of the company secretary, that is, the status is as high as that of director. The role of company secretary were laid out. In fact, more than a page, and the reporting lines. specifically stating that the company secretary has two reporting lines, the functional reporting line to the chairman of the board and the administrative to the managing director. And specifically, that particular code provides for the company secretary's responsibility to carry out performance evaluations. So gradually you see where we started in 1990, where nothing was stated regarding the role of a company secretary in respect of corporate governance, and now to expansion of the role beyond the secretarial aspect. In fact, what you see in the various frameworks, guidelines issued by the regulatory authorities, be it the Secretaries and Exchange Commission, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, the Financial Reporting Council, is that more responsibilities have been given to the company secretary. And in the recent template for reporting of corporate governance compliance by the Securities and Exchange Commission in Nigeria, it is stated clearly that the company secretary is the chief compliance officer in Nigeria. And some months ago, precisely in August, we now have a new Companies Act, which is called the Companies and Land Matters Act 2020. It's for the first time exempted a small company from appointing a company secretary. However, all other companies, that if you are beyond the threshold of 120 million turnover, you must have a company secretary because you are no longer regarded as a small company. So we have that particular role now being expanded, and it has given credence to the fact that the company secretary is a key stakeholder in governance of any entity, and it has been recognized that the sustainability of any entity depends on the entrenchment of good corporate governance practices, and that is why we have more specific responsibilities and roles being assigned to the company secretary, whether it's in an in-house company secretary or an external firm or company secretary. The responsibilities are the same, and the qualification also clearly laid out. The appointment process is very rigorous, and the good thing that we have in Nigeria, what makes the role unique, is that since 1990, the law, Companies and Land Matters Act, has provided for the mode of removal. So the director cannot just remove the company secretary. They must specify the reasons why they intend to remove the company secretary. They must give the company secretary the opportunity to respond to those reasons. And it is only when the reasons for the removal is that of fraud or gross misconduct that the board can remove the company secretary. Other than that, the board must report the matter to the General Assembly, which is the general meeting, that is the meeting of the shareholder, and it is only the shareholders that have the right to remove the company secretary in that particular instance. So unlike other professions, I don't know of any other profession in Nigeria as at now whereby the law provides that you cannot just remove a professional, but that is the unique status in Nigeria, and the reason for this is simple. Is to give the company secretary the opportunity to do his or her work creditably, professionally, and without any fear or favor that any board or any member of the board will harass him or her. So every company secretary has that opportunity to demonstrate professionalism, to do his or her work as expected, although the job is expanding. And in fact, what I tell some of my counterparts is that the job of a company secretary in Nigeria is buy one, get for free, because you see the evolution from 1990 to now, the portfolio of the company secretary, the responsibility has been increased by a minimum of times 4, and it is hoped that it will keep on improving, because corporate governance is evolving, and as it is evolving, new responsibilities will be added. And it's nice, and we are living up to it, and it has given all company secretaries, all charter secretaries in Nigeria the opportunity to expand their horizon, and also the confidence to do their work without any fear, and also to interact with relevant regulatory authorities in such a way that things are done properly. So in summary, that will be the intro regarding the recognition, the role and status of company secretary in Nigeria. Thank you,
Bode. Thank you so much. I will now move forward to Ms. Nandita Chaudhary, Chief Executive, MAI CSA, Malaysia. So Nandita, briefly share your thoughts about the governance structure and role of the professionals in country. And I'll request you to kindly share a small what opportunity other expat members can say explore in say your jurisdiction.
Thank you, Ranjit. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning and good evening to all the people who are tuned into this webinar. And thank you to CSIA and ICSI for giving us the opportunity from Malaysia to speak to all of you. Now, how has the role of company secretaries evolved in Malaysia? Now, before the amendments to the Malaysian Companies Act in 1965, it was sufficient for a company secretary, and by when I say CS, I'm actually referring to company secretaries. It's a bit of a mouthful to say company secretaries all the time. So the CS was didn't have to have a qualification per se, so long as the CS was equipped with basic company secretarial knowledge, they were allowed to act as company secretaries. However, in the early 1990s, the Companies Act made it necessary for a CS to actually be qualified in the sense that one would have to be a member of a professional body in order to act as a CS. And if it's not a member of a professional body or any such bodies, you would be required to obtain a license from the Malaysian Registrar of Companies, which is now known as the Companies Commission of Malaysia, or CCM, in order to practice. Now, the Malaysian Companies Act 2016 has gone one step further, requiring the CS to only be a member of a professional body, but also to be licensed by the Companies Commission. So now it is a mandatory requirement for a company secretary to obtain a practicing license from the CCM, without which one cannot practice or be named as a company secretary of any Malaysian registered company. Now, I would also like to add here in a gist that when the Malaysian Code on Corporate Governance was first introduced in 2000 and then subsequently reviewed in 2007 and 2012, the role of the company secretary was not as defined as one would have liked it to be. However, the MCCG 2017 has given a rather defined role of the CS in upholding the code and has in a way entrenched the vital role of the CS and other stakeholders in matters of corporate governance and other important advisory issues. Now, the CS's role has significantly evolved to that of a governance professional, emphasizing the critical responsibility of the modern-day company secretary, evolving from merely advising on administrative matters or statutory matters to advising the board on governance matters as well. Now, qualifications, you may want to know what are the qualifications that are required in the Malaysian context. Now, to elaborate, the course qualification of CGQP scheme in Malaysia allows a student who has completed his or her corporate administration degree in one of the local universities. Now, MITSA recognizes that qualification, and therefore these degree holders may take up 4 out of the 7 subjects under the CGQP scheme. Now, these 4 subjects are risk management, board dynamics, corporate governance, and corporate secretarial practice. And the same have to be in order to already have, out of the 4, three would also, so that's something that they would have done, and it's recognized by MITSA, and therefore they only are allowed to take, or they are only required to take 4 subjects. Now, if a person wishes to come to Malaysia company secretary, they not only have to have the relevant qualification, either be a Malaysian citizen or be a permanent resident. So therefore, a company secretary shall undertake to change citizenship and or be a permanent resident in order to qualify to be named as a company secretary. And once you become a company secretary, you shall have to undertake professional development, continuous professional development programs to achieve the annual designated CP points. Now, these are stipulated by the company's commission. Okay, to date, I just want to let you know that in MITSA, we membership comprises of ACI 500. So we are still growing, and we are hoping towards it.
Nandita, your voice is not coming properly. So you can conclude. We can later on say elaborate this. Yes. I think we have lost the voice from Nandita. So let me move forward now to Mr. Dr. Lovemore. He is CEO of ICSAZ, Zimbabwe. So now, Lovemore, and I request you to kindly finish in 3 to 4 minutes. Time is the essence. So over to you now.
Thanks a lot, Ranjit. Greetings to all in various jurisdictions. I'm Lovemore Gomera from the Institute of Chartered Secretaries in Zimbabwe. We are part of the CGI Institute that looks after the governance in different divisions. In Zimbabwe, we were founded as an Act of Parliament in 1971. And we're the only institute that trains chartered secretaries in Zimbabwe, although we have other professions practicing as corporate secretaries allowed. Okay, I'm getting some echoes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, please
Excellent.
continue.
Okay, great. So the institute in Zimbabwe is a bit different from the other corporate secretaries institutes in the sense that not only do we qualify corporate secretaries, but we also qualify accountants as well. I think it was as a result of the involvement of the corporate secretary in Zimbabwe in particular, the need to have the corporate secretary acting as the finance director as well. So at that point, this is why then the curriculum was actually expanded to include the financial bit. When you look at the way the body is represented, in Zimbabwe, we have got a plus or minus 2,000 qualified members that are working both in Zimbabwe and outside of Zimbabwe. And as I mentioned, we are regulated by the Act of Parliament, and we certify these corporate secretaries. So the categories that act as corporate secretaries in Zimbabwe are the chartered secretaries of ICSA. We have got the chartered accountants registered under the Chartered Accountants Act. We have got the legal practitioners as well, acting as corporate secretaries, and we've got public accountants. So the result of this legal prescription was that any person who participates or is a member of those corporate bodies can actually act as company secretaries in Zimbabwe. So, however, we have a bit of challenge in terms of the position in Zimbabwe because it's not clear-cut who should be exclusive in terms of the corporate secretary because of those other bodies that were actually allowed to operate as corporate secretaries. So, in a nutshell, this is who we are, and like I said, we're the only body that qualifies chartered secretaries.
Thank you so much, Lamur. Now I am going to my Indian counterpart, Mr. B. Murli. He is Senior Vice President and Legal and Company Secretary, Nestle India Limited. So, Mr. Murli, governance structure and role of the company secretaries, how it is divergent in India, and how it is convergent with the other, because you have already heard three learned speakers who talk about in their jurisdiction. So over to you in regard to Indian context.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all the viewers, and thanks to CSIA and ICSI for this opportunity. If I may say, we had earlier, I'll give a brief history and then how the governance professional role has evolved in India. We had earlier the Companies Act and the listing agreements where you can say there was limited governance. Then we had the first major push was the formation of the Securities and Exchange Board of India in 1992. And in early 2000, we had clause 49 of the listing agreement, which got implemented, which I would say the first provision on governance. Then we had the next big leap was the Companies Act 2013, which brought in many of the governance concepts into the Companies Act itself. Prime among them, there are many, but if I have to highlight, the whole issue of independent directors came into the law, Companies Act, and we even have a code of independent director as a schedule to the Companies Act now. Then the next big one was the SEBI listing and obligation and disclosure requirement regulations 2015. So from a listing agreement, it moved to regulations, the governance. And if I have to point out a very interesting perspective, the chapter 2, which is after the definition, is devoted to the principles of disclosure and obligation of listed entity, and it lists various facets of what are whether it's the recognizing the right of the shareholders, or it is equitable treatment, or the key functions and responsibilities of the board. So it has the principles around it to give it more, if I may say, form over substance shouldn't be the issue, more the way you want to approach it. And I would say that the regulations continue to evolve with the requirements of the time. And this is also reflected in the World Bank ranking of India. If you talk about minority protection, it has always been very, very high in the order. I mean, if I come now to the role of the corporate secretary, company secretary, and my journey more or less mirrors, you can say, the way the governance has started. I remember when I started, it was more about compliance, filling forms, filing, taking approvals and all. Today, that's all hardly, I mean, I would say not even 5% of what you do. You're now a more of a governance professional. And when I say talk about it, this has been obviously very much supported by the amendment we have had in the Companies Act, with the new Companies Act, where the company secretary is a key managerial personnel along with the managing director, the whole-time director. So the company secretary is now a part of the management, and in most companies would report to the CEO or chairman, depending on whatever the structure. And obviously, we have heard some of the speakers about the role of the strategic advice to the board on governance issues. But I would say important also is the designing and implementation of a governance process, to promote and sustain governance. It's a very nice word to say, but to live it, you need to have processes, you need to have mechanisms that you sustain that governance that takes place day on day in the company. And also mechanisms to contribute to the effectiveness of the board. Now we have things like board evaluation where a role can be played. We have issues of now skill assessment of the directors so that the board has a diversity in its approach. The other area is about the orientation of the directors, which again I would say a very important role that the company secretary plays. Unless the independent director has the proper orientation and full information on the company, the contributions can only be that much, better is that. And the last but not the least, I would say, and this is a growing role, is the interplay with other functions, other areas. So whether we talk about the CFO or the finance department, accounts become a very important point. In financial statements are a very important part of our duty, which is there. We have lot of issues around sustainability now, which also you have to take care. So it could be an area in the manufacturing when we are talking about, it could be in procurement of raw and packing materials. It could be around the supply chain, like the transport that you use, how do you reduce carbon footprint? You have to interact with business heads on what their launch plans are, how they are dealing with issues from a governance perspective. HR is a normal thing, anything to do with employees, the vigil mechanism that the company has, the IT heads, which relate to the cyber issues. And today, with work from home and all of us being on these networks, how do you secure your company's information? How do you secure the communication? Things like that. Protect yourself from cyber attacks. Now, this also you have to see that these are all being done in the right way. And so I can go on, but you can say it's very encompassing from what you started. I started today. You literally have to be involved with every business, every activity in the corporate level. And obviously the ICICI has played a great role. I would say the pace of our transformation towards governance professional has, I would say, been faster than the regulatory developments. And I think, if I may say, I think the secretarial standards, probably these are amongst the first in the world that we have secretarial standards for so many of the important issues. And two of them have even now formed part of the legislation. So that this obviously gives a lot of support to professionals in implementing governance, because when you have more of support coming in from the institute. The other thing which I would say probably may not be recognized recently, we have this issue of ECSIN, where every company secretary is mapped to which company he or she is the company secretary. Now, this is all about bringing more rigor in seeing that the professional advice is available and you have the adequate bandwidth to service. Like if a company secretary is going to be, say, company secretary of 10 companies, you can well imagine it's not going to be possible that you are going to be able to discharge your duties responsibly. Supported with that, you have now the system of UDIN, where any document that is signed, you have to have, this is for my fellow members in practice, you have to have the number, which this is all about discipline, rigor, and ensuring that the level of governance and compliance that the company secretary secures is of the highest order. And we have assurance. How is the assurance? Assurance is through the secretarial audit. Now, it's a mandatory for most of the companies. It's something which earlier you company secretary, now you have the board of directors to appoint, and then it is a part of the director's report, which is the most important document which goes to the shareholders. And if there is any finding in the secretarial audit report, the board of directors are required to comment on it. So, automatically these are all pushing towards the best-in-class governance. And now recently even SEBI has put in the requirement of secretarial audit for the listing regulations. So, the focus on governance is only increasing. If I may say, therefore, we are today evolved to be the custodian of corporate governance, and I would say the conscience keeper of the company. Just to conclude, this is only what I'm talking is about as a corporate professional in a corporate. Obviously, outside this also, there has been a wide development in terms of the gamut where company secretaries are playing role, if I may say, for example, under the SEBI, various provisions, the GST, the Insolvency, Consumer Protection Act, and so on. So just to say that we seem to be heading in the right direction, and thanks for that.
Thank you, Murli. Thanks for your insight about the governance structure in the India and role of the governance professionals. Of course, as Murli has mentioned, that apart from the regulatory governance, self-governance is also, say, one of the motto of the ICSI. And in that direction, we have came out with the ECSI, and Employee Company Secretary Identification Number, and Unique Document Identification Number, wherein all the document has the specific number provided by the institute which a certifying professional is supposed to issue. And of course, secretarial audit and secretarial standard is also one of the things which institute cherish, that it has released. And of course, secretarial audit is great recognition company secretary profession here in India has got. Now moving forward, I will now go to Miss Kristen for her say opening remarks and whatever is happening in South Africa. So she is Group Company Secretary of Old Mutual, South Africa. So over to you now, Kristen.
Thank you, Ranjit, and I hope that everybody can hear me. I'm going to try hard and make up some time for you. And stick to your 3 to 4 minute guidance. So from a South African perspective, I think the role has evolved rather rapidly in the past 20-25 years, and mostly as a result of the King Report on governance, which most people will be familiar with, and the various iterations. So from about 1999, it is now compulsory for public companies to have company secretaries. But the King Report, the latest King Report on corporate governance, also recommends that actually all entities should appoint a company secretary as part of best practice. Now, in terms of our Companies Act, the qualifications is set out in that act, and it merely states that the individual should have the requisite knowledge or experience of relevant laws and must be a permanent resident in the Republic of South Africa and remain so whilst serving as the company secretary. So that's the only requirement. Traditionally, company secretaries either have a law degree or they have the Institute of Chartered Secretaries qualification as company secretaries. So it's either one of those. Sometimes companies are bold and they will appoint a chartered accountant, but that is few and far between. In South Africa, the main duties of the company secretary has evolved drastically and is growing exponentially. The main duty is to provide guidance to the board of directors around their duties, responsibilities and powers. And King 4 further builds on that and says that the directors must ensure that the company secretary has the necessary gravitas and objectivity to provide independent guidance to the board on corporate governance. So very much an advisory and governance role, and it has evolved, as I said, exponentially. There's significant opportunities within South Africa for corporate secretaries. There's just way too much work to go around, and good qualified company secretaries will not be found wanting for work. As I said, the role has since 1999 evolved significantly, and the company secretary itself plays a much more strategic role in keeping the organization safe and being the conscience of the organization. And I see that just going forward from here on in. It's the importance of the role is just increasing day by day. And I think, Ranjit, I'll stop there and hand over back to you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. You are well before the time and covered almost. Now I'll move to Mr. Simon, Company Secretary, Australia and New Zealand Banking Group, ANZ. So Mr. Simon is now going to speak about the Australia and New Zealand. Over to Mr. Simon.
Thank you, Ranjit, and hello to everyone, and thank you to CSIA and ICSI for the opportunity to speak today. And I've got to say it's been fascinating to hear about the structure of corporate secretaries and governance in other jurisdictions. Myself, I've been a company secretary for just over 22 years now, the first 7 years in England and then the last 15 in Australia. And I've certainly seen development in the role over that period of time. In terms of Australia, the basic principle is the role is recognised in the Corporations Act 2001. Now, the only requirement we have in there is for public companies to appoint a company secretary. Other companies, proprietary limited companies and large proprietary limited companies aren't required to. And the only other regulation we have around the role is that the person must be over 18 where a company secretary is appointed, and they mustn't be disqualified from managing a corporation by the regulators. There's no other training requirements under the Act itself, but that doesn't mean to say that the role isn't important. Under the Corporations Act, where a company secretary is appointed, it is an officer of the company, and the role itself is subject to strict statutory and common law duties, which we must comply with. In Australia, we also have, as our governing body for the profession, we have the Governance Institute of Australia, and it is one of the oldest industry associations in Australia. It's been around for 110 years now. And as an employer of company secretaries and trainee company secretaries, it's certainly a valuable qualification that employers look for. Similar to a lot of other commentators in today, the role has changed over the years as the regulatory landscape has gotten more and more complex, both in the international context and also domestically with a number of high-profile collapses and other governance issues. We've had a number of changes to our governance principles that guide listed companies, which we call the ASX Corporate Governance Principles. They were changed in 2010, 2014 and 2019. In 2014, they introduced a recommendation that all listed companies have to disclose annually if they comply, and if they don't comply, why they don't. That the company secretary must be accountable to the board through the chairman on all matters to do with the proper functioning of the board. So that highlights the importance placed on the role. But similar to other commentators, what I've seen most in the change is moving from, say, a servant of the board, where a lot of the duties are compliance and statute based, to more of a strategic advisor as to the whole proper functioning of the board. If I have to boil down my reason for being, as I believe to be a company secretary, it's to help my organisation and the people within it, to help them make good decisions. And so that brings with it a lot of opportunities for people that practice in the role as a company secretary or a governance professional in the Australian landscape. With that, I think I'll try and keep it short, Ranjit. So back over to you.
Thank you so much for being very crisp and very to the point. Now I'll move forward to Netherlands. Dr. Edo Wet, professor at Governance University, the Netherlands. So he will speak about the what is happening in the corporate governance front and what role governance professionals are performing in Netherlands and nearby jurisdictions. Mr. Wette.
Thank you very much, and hello to everybody. Thank you for sharing my insights from a perspective from the Netherlands, a tiny country in Europe. I stick it very briefly. Well, what I see is that the role and position for the company secretary are not regulated by law. There's no license nor any qualifications. The position of the company secretary is mentioned in the governance code for the listed companies, but there are several sectoral governance codes in the public sector, and there's no mention at all of the company secretary. That does not mean that there are company secretaries at all those organizations. There are. I've also been a company secretary for over 20 years in a social housing company, and that's what it is today. I'm also teaching at the university, at the Governance University, and once in 4 years there is a great research among the Dutch company secretaries, and I also quote something about their vision of the role of the company secretary in Holland. First of that, I shall share you some problems of the company secretaries. There are three: time pressure, conflicting lines of accountability, and information management. So how do I get the proper right information at time on the boardroom table? I think they're common to most of us. When the company secretary were asked about the future role, now the most common are the support of meetings and the reporting role. They also see that the role is getting more complex every day. They see that the role is becoming more strategic, it's from an administrator to more compliance, more strategic advisor, and even the moral conscious of our organization. And they also feel that they get more and more influence on the decision-making process itself. So that is, from a Dutch perspective, there's no role and position regulated by law or anyone has a license to get or any qualifications. So in brief, that's the status in the Netherlands. Oh, well, here you see I had well, I can quote it again. Here you see the background. The role and position is not regulated by law. The position, what I told, for the listed companies, there is a governance code, a Dutch governance code. And for the sectoral governance code, the non-profit organizations or the public organizations, there's hardly no attention for the company secretary. And as I told you, they experience problems for the company secretaries, which has been conducted by research of Governance University, time pressure, always the time pressure, conflicting lines of accountability, and how do I get the proper information at the right moment at the table of the board or information management. Please give me the next slide. And that's what the company secretaries see for themselves as a future role. There's still a role of supporting the board, the servant, or preparing the meetings and the reporting role. But they also see that the role is getting more complex and more different. And they see that the role of the company secretary is evolving from an administrator to more compliance and even a more strategic role. And the last one is that they are seeing that the role in the company itself, they are getting more influence for the decision-making processes. And that is by the role itself, by producing the right content. Please skip this. I will tell it in the questions later on.
Thank you so much. I think all the panelists has spoke very well and justified the topic, convergence and divergence of the role of a corporate secretary in various jurisdictions. One exercise CSIA has done last year under the project Thought Leadership, wherein the corporate secretary role, regulation, governance, and these survey has been conducted. And this survey detailed report has been prepared, and it is survey name is the Corporate Secretaries Role, Regulations and Governance, a Global Comparative Survey. So this survey has been conducted, and a small presentation, our last panelist, last but not the least, and he is going to speak a bit longer with his presentation. Mr. Mohan Datwani, Senior Director, HKICS Hong Kong. So he will be speaking and taking up a small presentation on the survey conducted on the thought leadership, and he is going to share his screen and present what is there in the report. So time is around 12 to 15 minutes maximum. So over to you, Mohan.
Hi, everybody. Nice to be here today. Ranjit, thank you so much. Are you actually seeing the PowerPoint? You're not, right?
It's not as of now.
It just says share screen, and then there's something funny that's going on. Why don't I just talk, if that is okay?
Yes. Should we share the screen?
If you can, that'd be great.
Yes, we will share the screen. You just, yeah, you start speaking, and in the meanwhile, we are sharing the screen.
Okay, great. So, it is a very useful topic, the company secretary, because we've heard from all the speakers how important the company secretary is in terms of being a governance professional and how that role has evolved. So we thought that it would be interesting to take a snapshot so that people know how important our profession is. I prepared a PowerPoint, and I think that is being shared right now. Ranjit, is that happening now? Can't hear you. Your mic is not on.
It's visible?
Is it? I don't see it.
No, I don't think so.
No, but why don't I just talk? Okay.
Yes.
That's easier. Okay. So I've done a PowerPoint, and I think it's up to Ranjit to distribute it later to all the participants. It's titled "The Convergence and Divergence of the Roles of the Corporate Secretary in Various Jurisdictions." As Ranjit said, we've done a survey, and therefore we actually put in a report. So my name is Mohan Zatwani. I am Senior Director. Oh, there we are. Right. Can you go up one page, please?
Next page. Yes, it is coming now.
Yeah, great, fine. So we put in the standard disclaimer. We've also put in a page about HAICS. We have something like 10,000 members and students in Hong Kong. The reason being that Hong Kong is one of the largest IPO jurisdictions. If you look at market cap of our companies, listed companies, we're talking about $6 trillion US. That is a lot of money, and therefore the company secretary has a very important have a very important name and function in Hong Kong as governance professionals. We actually took a snapshot back in 2012 as to what the Hong Kong Company Secretary does for listed companies. And in the next page, you will see. Can we have the next page, please? In the next page, you will see a distribution of the functions. So these will include regulatory compliance, board and committee services, advisory roles, shareholders and other communications, and additional responsibilities. Now, this is for the listed companies. As I said, there is some market cap of $6 trillion US in Hong Kong's market. Now, if you look at the national debt of the US, it's 20 trillion. So our size is actually around 1/3 of the national debt of the United States. So it's a pretty big function, and there's a lot of responsibilities for the company secretaries. Actually, a lot of our colleagues from different jurisdictions do come to Hong Kong. So, for example, the corporation secretary is Paul Stafford. He's from the UK UCREATE division, and he serves as HSBC's corporation secretary. So we have a lot of very important and powerful individuals in Hong Kong who are company secretaries and who actually help companies make decisions. So can we turn to the next page, please? Well, I was saying that CSIA did a particular report, and it's the Corporate Secretary Roles, Regulations and Governance, a global comparative survey. The Hong Kong division actually contributed to this particular survey. And then there are also other jurisdictions. In fact, there are 17 jurisdictions altogether. There's Australia, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, mainland China, Malaysia, Thailand, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and the United States. So next page. And the report says very clearly what its aims are. Now, this comparative analysis of countries and jurisdictions across the globe is aimed at facilitating an understanding of the recognition of the corporate secretary and governance professionals, the governance roles that the company secretaries perform as part of discharging their regulatory compliance, and demonstrating how the role of the corporate secretary and governance professional has evolved in line with developments over the last few years. Previously, companies may have seen governance practices as guidelines, whereas in the current environment, companies of all sizes and statures understand the need to ensure good governance in all aspects of their business activities. Corporate governance has become the key driver for creating an environment where risks can be mitigated, opportunities recognized, and strategies strengthened. You can see that, there's a lot of areas that are covered in this particular report. We decided some general questions. We asked questions about specific qualifications and recognitions. We looked at appointments. We looked at removal, and we looked at the governance role of the corporate secretary, along with different jurisdictional notes and a glossary. So I actually looked at the report in preparing for this particular presentation. I found a number of themes. The first theme, and which as many of our speakers alluded, is that we as corporate secretaries are widely recognized. So most jurisdictions actually recognize the position of the company secretary. So that's actually on page 17 to 20 of the CSIA report, in case you read it. And for example, in Hong Kong, it's compulsory for all companies to have a company secretary. Now, the roles and responsibilities of the company secretary are very wide. I've just gone through the Hong Kong particular functions, and you can see that there are a lot of functions. These include administrative functions. So, for example, record keeping, disclosures, and you'll find that, as presented, there are many jurisdictions that have this function, Malaysia, Thailand, etc. But as discussed, increasingly, it's actually getting less of importance in comparison with the governance function. There's also a need for the company secretary to coordinate and ensure efficient company management. We see, for example, Bangladesh and India mentioning this in the report. We also see that compliance, board procedures, and facilitation of communications are extremely important. Bhutan, India, Nepal, etc. all spoke of this. We also see a theme that emerges is that for the listed company, it's mandatory. So Indonesia, mainland China, and even if it's established outside jurisdictions in Hong Kong, you actually need a company secretary for a listed company. In Hong Kong, in fact, all companies, you require a company secretary. So the second theme is this. While details vary, there are requirements in being a company secretary, and also the reporting line is actually clear. So on the specific issue as to whether the company secretary or corporate secretary could be a corporate or an individual, and the age and resident qualifications, really local rules govern. The CSIA report actually provides a very useful comparison and explanation of the requirements of different jurisdictions. The corporate secretary, in most cases, actually reports either to the CEO or the chairman. And this is quite a prevalent theme. And if you could see that in Australia, Bhutan, India, Malaysia, Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe, etc., there is actually a direct access of the corporate secretary to the chairman or the CEO. In fact, that is a very important matter. In terms of the third theme, we see that usually it's only qualified persons that could be company secretaries for listed companies. So there are a number of jurisdictions that require corporate secretaries of listed companies to be qualified persons. We know that this is definitely the situation in Hong Kong, and also in mainland China's board secretaries, Singapore, Thailand, Nigeria, Zimbabwe. We all know that listed companies carry a very important function. So while the requirements really vary from specific jurisdictions, the qualification of being a chartered secretary is actually almost always a plus. So for example, in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Secretaries member as chartered secretary will be qualified as a company secretary. And it is a very, very lucrative profession in Hong Kong. Can we have next page? So we also asked a number of questions, and actually those questions actually came from our survey of people and what they are doing. So we asked the company secretaries whether you advise the board on director statutory duties under law disclosure obligations and listing requirements. And of course, no surprise they do. Similarly, we find that the corporate secretary advises the board in respect of corporate governance requirements and practices and effective board processes. The report also found that the corporate secretary is related to developing and implementing processes to promote and sustain good corporate governance. The corporate secretary also provides strategic advice to the board about corporate governance issues and is involved in designing and implementing and maintaining a properly structured corporate governance framework. So if we look at the next page, we actually summarize some of the other functions. We also noted that the company secretary actually improves board effectiveness by conducting corporate governance audits, administering board evaluations and board skill assessment, and implementing director education and orientation programs. The company secretary also assists the executive management team with the production of annual reports and financial press releases, and he or she also interacts with the company's CEO, CFO, financial team, external auditors, and Securities Council regarding corporate governance aspect of a company's financial statements. We asked different jurisdictions, whether these governance roles that we have identified they are actually carried out by you, and we see basically everybody says. So if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 jurisdictions, all said that they do these functions. So you can actually see that there is a mixed variety of functions. So in conclusions, the corporate secretary has administrative functions globally, but the role has evolved, as all the speakers have said, into a strategic advisor to the board. So the corporate secretary is recognized as the voice of practical governance and the custodian of corporate governance in organizations. In many jurisdictions, they are recognized as senior management. There is no doubt that the unique skills of the corporate secretary will be recognized as an international profession and will be achieving increasing recognition and prominence, including under the leadership of CSIA and ICSI, etc. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mohan. And now we are getting some questions from the, you can stop the screen share now. Questions from the audience also, and we have prepared some questions from the panelists on the request of the panelists and also with the discussion. So let's discuss one by one, and in fact some governance related questions has already been framed by us, and some of the questions are coming from the audience. So first question which is coming to everybody's mind, and it is always a global question, that the world has become the global village, and the framework of corporate governance is not only important for prosperity of the corporate, but critical as it has the impact on the all facets of the society. So question is that how does governance framework impact the role and recognition of the company secretary in say various jurisdictions? And this question, first question I am going to ask to Ms. Kristen. You can start with this question, Kristen.
Thank you, Ranjit. Just checking that you can hear me. Just a thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay. So, Ranjit, I think I'm going to flip the question a bit.
Yes, please.
And just start with the following statement and say that the governance framework, whether it's in a large organization or a small organization, it can't be a static thing. It is a living organism almost, and together with all the various governance artifacts which we have in place, which is the terms of reference, the articles of association or the memorandum of incorporation, whatever it is, the various board charters, they all interlink, and they form a type of what I refer to as a living organism. And there is only one person in my that can caretake this organism for the next generation of company secretaries that follows you in that organization. And that is the company secretary. I think we all have the frustration that there is always lots of governance experts in an organization, but they don't have the technical ability and they don't have the understanding to understand how the various bits and pieces of this governance framework and all the governance artifacts tie into each other. And when you delete a word on one document, how that impacts throughout the organization and throughout this governance system. So for me, the ownership of and the implementation of this governance framework is key for the company secretary. I do not believe it's somebody else that can own this. We can have lots of philosophical and technical debates about ownership and implementation of the framework. For me, it is more about the company secretary must be charged with caretaking this framework, making sure that it works properly in terms of the larger organization, that it keeps the organization safe. And again, I refer back to my comment at the beginning, is we are the conscience of the organization, and it is important that we are able to discharge that voice. The only way we can discharge it is through taking ownership of this governance framework together with all the artifacts that belong to it. And I'm going to leave it there, Ranjit, and perhaps take questions or we can discuss further. You're on mute, Ranjit.
Yes. Now I'm going to move on next, and this question is conflict between ownership and management, owner and real owners, and who are managing the show. So the stakeholders are the real owner of the corporations, everybody knows, and management is done by the board, or say governance function is also performed by the board. There is a strong likelihood that there is a mismatch between the expectation of the stakeholders and action management takes for the benefit of the corporation. So this mismatch is there. Therefore, my question to you, that how would you suggest the role of the corporate secretaries to provide the degree of protection to the all the stakeholders, including owners, and maximization of the wealth of the stakeholders, and how they should ensure that investors should be safeguarded not only against the fraud, but their wealth should also be maximized in the longer run. Mr. Mohan.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is exactly the questions that we're grappling at. Now, first of all, I'm a solicitor, that means a lawyer in our jurisdiction. Under our old English company law, I think, and a lot of jurisdictions that are English law jurisdiction actually have this particular issue. The primary duty owed by the directors is to the shareholders collectively as a whole to maximize profit. So the directors are there to maximize profit. Now, so suddenly you find this really difficult dynamics. There are lots of stakeholders nowadays. They all demand that, their interests to be considered. But yet, the company really should be focused on looking at, maximizing profit for the shareholders. Okay. So it is a big conflict, and you see inroads being built in the UK. So in the UK Companies Act, they now say that, well, the director's duty is not just owed to the shareholders collectively as a whole. That means to maximize profit, but also to different variety of stakeholders. Okay. So in Hong Kong, our law has not gone that advanced. So you, in this situation, BlackRock, Fidelity, everybody, when they want to invest in a company, they're looking at, increasingly your ESG, how you deal with stakeholders, how you deal with suppliers, are you a caring employer, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the same time, you have shareholders who really want profits maximized. So we have actually formed the view that a company must act with purpose. The purpose is actually to take into account relevant stakeholders. And why do you have to take into a relevant stakeholders account is that if you look at short term, yes, it is profit maximization. But if you look at longer term for sustainability, which is a key catchword in the international circle, you find that the reality is that you cannot ignore stakeholders' interests. So therefore, our institute is going next year to argue something called purposeful governance. And purposeful governance means that when you deal with business, you actually take into account relevant, and the word is relevant stakeholders' interests. And in that case, there's actually no conflict. Because if you start looking at a longer term, in order for the company to be sustainable, it has to take into account longer term interests. So therefore, the corporate secretary's role really is to educate the directors and management that interests of stakeholders are very important. Secondly, they have a real facilitation role of the actual engagement process. You can't just engage everybody. For example, I used to do mining in Mongolia, and people would come to ask me, do you use peanuts in your operations? Because, there are people that are allergic to peanuts. And I sort of say, like, why does peanut have to do with Outer Mongolia mining in coal, cooking coal? So increasingly, that is the function of the company secretary, really to strike a real balance and to take down and engage the relevant stakeholders. So Ranjit, I don't know if you want any further elaboration on that.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'll move next. I think very well answered and reframe the question and answer as well. So going forward, one question has came. In fact, two similar questions has came from the members. It is thanking CSIA for the great opportunity to engage at such critical period. I'm interested in knowing if the CSIA can develop a global curriculum that would help bridge the conversion gap when practitioner move from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. So I think if Karen is there, she can answer, or maybe Nandita, you can attempt this. Another related question is there, that should there be a framework of internationally accepted norm of corporate governance, internal governance code, as it is in the case with the accounting and auditing standard, to form the basis of qualification to allow corporate secretary to practice globally. So I think these two questions are related question. I think CSIA as a either I can answer or maybe Karen can answer this. But as far as internationally accepted global standards, maybe named as International Governance Code, can it be say developed? So Nandita, first you attempt this, and thereafter I may go to the Karen also.
Okay, thank you, Ranjit. Although I would say that there may be many similarities in areas of practice, but to actually expect an international code and allow a company secretary from one jurisdiction to come to another jurisdiction to work, now achieving that kind of uniformity and framework of standards, that can be a challenge. Now, due to the differing laws that are prevailing in each country, and how the company secretary's role is regulated by those laws in that particular country. I would have already said that earlier, but I will reiterate what I've stated earlier. For instance, in Malaysia, the position of the company secretary is entrenched into the Malaysian Companies Act, and one can only act as a company secretary upon fulfilling those qualifications, which are defined in the Act. Therefore, for someone who is coming from another jurisdiction, you may not in your jurisdiction, the qualification may not be a necessity, but for you to move into my jurisdiction, that becomes a necessity. Now, having said that you may have a problem having this uniformity in the framework. It would be nice to practice in the global field to have some kind of a standard framework. Now, this kind of standard frameworks, that if we wish to have this kind of standard frameworks akin to what the accounting people are having, where they actually are able to move because they have got very similar accounting frameworks. Now, that maybe we could talk about looking at certain instances, like, for instance, I was thinking about techniques of recording minutes. Maybe in recording minutes, we can have standard practices so that a company secretary who may wish to move to another jurisdiction gets a heads up on how to go about doing his or her work with minimal disruption, right? And then, in the similar instance, you can have about preparation of your resolutions. This too is an area where standard frameworks would be of importance. Now here we could explore on the use of appropriate language, techniques, formatting. This is also again akin to what the accounting bodies have in their reporting of financial statements. Now, regulation of meetings, having a standard framework would be very helpful, but we'll still have to ensure that because of the differing laws in each and every jurisdiction, there may be a problem. You can talk about how to act as the focal point for communication between stakeholders in engagement on governance practices from the company secretarial perspective rather than the law of the land. Because the law of the land may be different from one to another. And perhaps one more which I could think about in having a standard framework would be a standard template in designing governance framework overlooking the corporate governance policy with broad guidelines such as board matters, management oversights, accountability, audit and transparency. And this, of course, would enable a company secretary to know what to expect in the global playing field. And these are some of the areas I personally feel we may look into in order to have a standardized framework. However, this list is certainly not exhaustive, and I'm sure Ranjit and Karen can probably expand on this even more. Thank you. I'm here.
Ranjit, you're on mute.
Yeah, one question directly given to the CSIA, which is saying that can you develop a global curriculum that would help bridge the conversion gap when practitioners move from one jurisdiction to another? So what is your views on that? Karen.
Thanks, Ranjit. So I lost you in the beginning, but I think in principle, based on what Nandita has just discussed, and coming from our Secretary of the CSIA, thank you, Nandita, for raising all those pertinent topics. And I think Nandita is 100% correct. I think we must remember that the CSIA tries to help bridge that gap in terms of the current knowledge sharing and the current best practices that we can share. Today is a prime example of us learning from each other about how things are done differently around the globe. And by having such a broad membership base, you can see that we manage to knowledge share and best practice share in all these areas. What I think we have to be careful of is that if somebody speaks of an accountant, you might speak of a lawyer or even a physiotherapist. Whenever they move from one country to another, as Nandita said, there will always be some marginal changes that have to take place. So that is in every profession. What I think we need to strive towards, as somebody has mentioned, is possibly getting to closing that gap in terms of knowledge skills and networking. And that's kind of what we're doing, and we've been trying to do more this year, is to really network amongst members and try and understand the differences that we have and obviously take the best of each practices. So by improving skills as company secretaries around the world, we're already closing that gap. And I think we must just be cognizant that Nandita said there will always be laws that we can't do at 100%. But by being able to do more CPD as we are, we're encouraging the skills base of all of our members to get wider. And that's the start.
Thank you, Karen. I think this question is a very important and crucial question. And in fact, it is setting the basis of this particular webinar, and wherein two things which is coming out. One is uniform, say, corporate governance code. And second is opportunity to practice across the globe by any member of any country. So I think any of the panelists, if you also want to supplement on this particular question, I think open to all of you. If you can supplement very briefly, maybe 1 minute or so. So anybody want to say something on this particular?
So Ranjit, let me just make a small comment on that. Regarding the International Corporate Governance Code, I think that is possible. And the reason is that if you look at all the corporate governance codes worldwide, you see a lot of similarities. The code started from a country, and other countries are just replicating, maybe domesticating some aspect of it, that is localizing some provisions of it. But if you look at the codes, generally speaking, I think substantially they are saying the same thing. In 4 codes, Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, the UK Code, generally you see common trend. So in terms of having an international code of corporate governance, I think that is feasible, and it will be with minimal resistance, because we are talking of corporates. Corporate is corporate, either you are private or public globally. So if you are public, you have the same uniform requirement, substantial, even from the report of the CSIA that we are considering today.
Yes.
Yes. Ranjit?
Yes, yes, Lamur.
Yeah, so I concur with what Bode is saying. Learning from the accounting and auditing, they actually have international accepted standards that are really principally based rather than rules based. So we could actually look at that as acceptable best practices that can form, the basis for the basis for principle-based international corporate governance standards. So it is possible that we can actually look in that direction. Thank you.
Agree. I think let's conclude this particular part, and I would also like to supplement a bit. India has already attempted in the form of secretarial standard in the board meeting and general meeting, and one of the institution in Malaysia has adopted also our secretarial standard. Of course, it requires cabinet approval from our side, and we have given the approval, and thereafter it has been accepted and adopted. But they have not adopted as it is. They have changed it as per their requirement, their law. So as Nandita has pointed out, yes, legal requirement may be different. But Lovemoore has pointed out, yes, principle-based governance structure or governance framework can always be set. And principles cannot be different. It is disclosure, transparency, accountability. These are the principles, which is the very basis of the governance. And if that is the basis of the governance, I think this kind of principles or guidelines can be set. Law may be different, but principle will remain similar. And CSIA can attempt this to have the governance principles or code which may come and down the line, because in the secretarial standard also in India we have the history. We started in year 2000, and it got the recognition in the statute in the year 2013. So it took 13 years or maybe more than that, because we might have attempted even before that. So 15-20 years it takes. So if we'll start today and all the countries are coming onto the common page, then definitely we'll be able to evolve this particular thing. And of course, making the codes are ever evolving process. So in fact, we have entered into MOU with the institutions also. CSIA can attempt that inter-institutional MOUs can be done. And one person moving from other jurisdiction, passing 2-3 papers, like ICSA has given the opportunity and signed the MOU with India, and only 2 paper if we are able to clear, then we can become member of ICSA. So what is required? That taking membership of that particular institution in that country. So this is, if that can be done, then global opportunity can also be thrown open to the practitioner to practice. Moving forward, another question which is coming is that the company secretaries are governance professionals whose role is to enhance the compliance framework, safeguard the integrity of the organization, promote higher standards, and activities of governance professional encompasses legal and regulatory duty, obligation, and additional responsibility assigned to the employer. So what are the Indian governance framework relating to board structure? So Murli, you have already attempted in your opening remarks. I would request throw some light on this particular aspect very briefly in 1 or 2 minutes, not more than that, because you have already given the details.
Yeah, if I may just say, the board governance, I think the institution of independent directors, and as a governance professional, how do you have the right set of independent directors with the right skill metrics, which gives diversity, not only in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of the gender, and the mechanism of performance evaluation, which is used to see that the board governance is working properly. If we look at management, I would say the key issue that comes up is the related party transactions and their governance around it. If you look at auditors, it's about appointment of auditors who are independent and who don't have any major cases and things like that. Now, under the law, anyway, you can't appoint an auditor for more than 5 years, and it's for one more term with a special resolution. Non-audit work also, there are guardrails that doesn't become a way to remunerate the auditors. When I look at risk management, and I would say this is the most important probably in today's scenario, especially aspect. Now it is under the law, the directors have to make a statement in the director's report, a statement that the company has a risk management system and that the same is operating efficiently. Obviously, this puts a lot of responsibility in having one which actually serves the purpose of the organization. And the last point I would say, which is very important in all these scheme of things, is a robust grievance redressal system and vigil mechanism, because that's what keeps a complete check on anything that may be getting away otherwise through the normal process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next would be, what are some growing area of practice for company secretaries? And I am just talking about the European perspective, that what are the consulting space in the Europe, especially relevant to the profession of governance professional and corporate secretary. So Simon, you attempt this question, and thereafter I will go to Vete also. So both of you can complement and supplement and answer this question.
Thanks, Ranjit. I'm going to need to flip it on its head a little bit, only as much as in the current environment, I can't speak to Europe having been based in Australia for the last 15 years. But if I can just talk briefly about some of the opportunities where I see the profession in Australia, which I think is also, as I understand from the UK environment, there's similar opportunities there. And this pertains, it's the experience that I've seen in my current role. I talked earlier about how I see the role as essentially helping my organisation and the people within it make good decisions. The role of the company secretary has always traditionally been around the board and the board governance. One of the things that we've focused on at the Governance Institute of Australia is around whole of organisation governance. I mean, I work for an organisation that operates in 32 different jurisdictions. We have over 40,000 employees. I see more and more demand and need within my organisation for really good governance advice. There's lots of forums within my organisation where decisions are taken, and there's more and more requests of me to help people within those different areas of management as to what are some really core sound governance principles to operate by. So I think that's a good opportunity for people within our profession to go outside the normal narrow lens of board governance to governance throughout the rest of the organisation. Another one that I wanted to highlight as well was that I know this is in the UK as well, in Europe as well as in Australia. There's been such a focus upon increased accountability for senior professionals within the organisation. In Australia, we have, particularly in the financial services sector, we have what we call the Banking Executive Accountability Regime, which places requirements on the accountability of the most senior people within our organisation, both the board and management. Now, I have a team that helps my organisation navigate through this, and pretty much what they do is they assist our most senior leaders clarify what their core accountabilities are and how they cascade those accountabilities throughout their teams, and also to help them identify what the reasonable steps are in carrying out those core accountabilities. So I think taking our governance skills as corporate secretaries, that's another area in which we can see the organisation develop. Another publication I wouldn't mind just highlighting that the Governance Institute of Australia did last year before the COVID-19 pandemic was really looking at the future of the governance professional. So if you go onto their website, there is a document there called The Future of the Governance Professional, where it has a lot of interviews with practicing governance professionals, both as company secretaries, non-executive directors and other governance professionals, as to how they see the role of the governance professional changing over the next few years. So I'd recommend that document to people on the call today. So hope that's enough, Ranjit.
Okay. Can you now supplement, Vetel?
Yes, of course. Thank you. I will supplement it. I see, because the question is the consulting space of the company secretary, I see in a Dutch perspective 3 growing areas. The first one is also mentioned. It's about stakeholder management. In Holland, we see the company secretary as qualified, and he has the right position to manage these important external relations. That is the first one. But it is also not to the external relations. I see there's another growing area. He is also acting more like a management consultant. So he is also mastering and facilitating internal dialogues, and he can play also a more active role as a management consultant, even in organizational development. So this is also internal as external. And then there is, I think, a third growing area, a consulting area, and that is the area of branding and communication. I think corporate secretaries will be more and more a counselor in creating and guarding the governance brand of an organization, of the company. So he will be held responsible to act as a guardian for the governance brand and the corporate values of the organization. So there's 3 areas when you speak about consulting phase or to be an advisor. That will be, I think, the 3 main new areas for the company secretary.
Okay. So now moving to Bode. Bode, you mentioned in your initial remarks that company secretary do the board evaluation also in your jurisdiction, Nigeria. So next question has came on that only, that board evaluation is carried out by the CS in many jurisdictions, including Nigeria. Would this function impact the reporting line if the corporate secretary report to the board, as it is done in the most of the cases, and here in India also some part of the reporting, and in fact most of the reporting, I would say, is done to the board. So what is your view on this, and how company secretary in Nigeria carries out the board evaluation?
Thank you, Ranjit. I do not see any conflict. The company secretary carries out the performance evaluation of the board. Let me just explain the peculiarities of this particular role in Nigeria. The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance provides that the board evaluation and the corporate governance evaluation should be done by external consultants once in every 3 years. So it gives the company secretary or each company the opportunity to do the performance evaluation in-house. And the only competent person that will do that is the company secretary. Why I do not see any conflict is that if you look at the Code of Corporate Governance we have in Nigeria, the content of the evaluation, the scope of the evaluation, we have them clearly laid out in that particular code. And basically, they are looking at the objective factors. When you are carrying out the performance evaluation, you are looking at key areas like the KPIs that the board has set for themselves, or the committees of the board have set, the targets that have been agreed by the board for the year, and these committees, what the chairman has promised to do. And as you know, every year there is a board plan that has been acceptable or reviewed by the board and approved. So in addition to that, we have some objective factors to be considered during the evaluation: attendance of meetings by the board, the mix of skills, the diversity that they have on the board, including gender. These are objective factors. You see that a director has attended so number of meetings or not. So the company secretary is not supplementing with his own personal information. The mix of skills is just for the company secretary when carrying out the evaluation to say, do we have the right mix of skills, which has been earlier approved. Diversity is also something that is visible. So and also we should be conscious of one thing: performance evaluation of the board requires substantial input from the board members. So it's not, and we have various directors. So what the company secretary is doing is collating those views of board members, asking specific questions to get the right responses, and just presenting those things. So the company secretary carrying out such evaluation will not be seen as imposing his personal view, whereby the board will now feel that is wishing something there. These are things that have been clearly agreed by the board as part of their board plan, as part of the objective for the year. So what is being done is just a review of what we have agreed. So it creates no conflict in terms of role, and in any case, that is the responsibility assigned to the company secretary. And as long as the company secretary acts in a professional manner, I don't see the board or the individual directors taking it personally. It's just an improvement process. And it is necessary for the company secretary to emphasize to the board members right from the outset that performance evaluation or board evaluation is an improvement process. It is not a process to condemn anybody. It is how to ensure that we keep on improving, or what are the improvement areas, and the language used matters. For example, we in such performance evaluation, words like weaknesses should not be used. Instead of weaknesses, it should be improvement areas. For focus areas, so that nobody is nobody is given the opportunity of interpreting it differently. Yes. So, as long as that is done professionally, I do not see any conflict in that particular role, and it will just assist in governance management and reporting of the company.
Let me now move to Mohan. And Mohan, in Indian context, we have the special status to the company secretary and recognition to the company secretary. They are bracketed as a key manager person along with the top management of the company. But in many jurisdictions, there is no such for recognition of company.
Sorry, Ranjit, you broke up. You froze.
I'm repeating the question again.
Don't repeat the question. I think I know what you're asking. Okay.
Yes. So as in the Singapore also, a recent amendment in SCRA Singapore has put it certain conditions and some recognition to the company secretaries. What do you think? Appointed by the law, and their role should also be specified to safeguard the governance and promote the good corporate governance in the corporates?
Yeah. Let me start from very basic. As I said, every company needs to have a company secretary. That's in our company's ordinance. But that's not intellectually satisfying, right? I mean, just being in the law, it doesn't really mean anything, okay? We talked about listed company, and in the listing rules, there's something called Rule 3.28, in which it says that, well, a company secretary of a listed company can only be a lawyer, accountant, or a chartered secretary. And recently, in some consultation of the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they say that this is the regulator that actually says that the company secretary is recognized as part of the senior management of listed companies. When I came here 8 years ago, I started arguing with the regulators that we should be recognized as senior management, and it is a process. The process is actually facilitated by top-notch submissions that we make to regulators, to the extent that, if there is a regulatory proposal, nowadays the stock exchange says that, hey, HKICS, that means the Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Secretary, what are your views? Your views cannot be ignored. So really, it is that technical excellence that has brought us there. But that's just a listed company. The other part is anti-money laundering. So we saw Panama Papers breaking out, and we found that the TCSP sector, the Trust and Corporate Service Provider sector, of which a lot of company secretaries are in senior management level, was actually not covered. So we, the Institute, went ahead and we wrote a sectoral regulation for self-regulation. That was actually recognized by the Hong Kong government in its official submission to the Financial Action Task Force. I think we all know FATF. So in the Hong Kong National Risk Assessment in Chapter 6.4 in 2018, we were recognized as a body before official regulations to actually regulate the TCSP sector for AML-CFT. So the hallmark of getting recognition is that you can't just sit here and say that, well, regulators recognize us. You have to give them a hope to recognize you. And in Hong Kong and in the mainland China, what we do is we actually always think ahead of the curve. And as I said, AML-CFT we've done. We're now looking at something called purposeful governance. We're looking at diversity. Diversity, for example, we have got a big debate on whether we need quotas or not, no quotas. We've always been against quotas in Hong Kong by many sectors, but eventually now with the needle being so bad, we only have 13% diversity amongst female board. So is it a time to talk about quotas? So we made some submissions to different regulators, and we're not saying yes or no, but by constantly being ahead and promoting topics, that's how we get recognition. So we are recognized under the SFC, Hong Kong Association of Bank Guidelines for AML-CFT purposes to have certain functions. We are widely recognized in a lot of other areas because of what we do. So Ranjit, is that sufficient?
Yes, I would like Murli to supplement a bit because it is mandatory in India to certain class of companies. So what is your say on this, Murli? Very briefly in 1 minute maybe.
No, I think it is, I would say it's in the right direction and a requirement. I mean, I can just supplement what has been said, and we have already got, I think, amongst the best possible recognitions that it's not about being a company secretary, but about being a key managerial personnel. And to me, it is more enabler, which helps you drive governance when you are on the same platform with the management of the company. It definitely aids you in driving compliance, because all these things have to be top down. If we want, it's very easy to say you have to have a governance culture. It really works only when it's top down, and this supports completely such sort of positioning.
Okay. Now moving forward to Lovemore, and in fact I will be taking 2-3 questions only thereafter, because it's 2:20 and 2:30 is the scheduled time to conclude. So in countries like Bangladesh and Zimbabwe, the corporate secretary will play a role of designing the framework, but the implementation is driven by the CEO or board. So what do you believe to be the advantage of the situation in your country? And if the corporate secretaries do not drive both, then what should be the impact? What is the impact on the governance? Lovemore, your views please on this.
Thank you, Ranjit. In Zimbabwe, we are fortunate that the public listed companies are required to have a secretary as a mandatory, and because it's regulated, you find that the demand for company secretaries are there, albeit from other professionals as well as the Chartered Secretary Institute. So in terms of just the roles and functions of the company secretary, I think from the sustainability side, you find that there were a lot of gaps, particularly in the during the COVID-19 pandemic, when companies started going on lockdown and things like that. It would seem that the stakeholders were actually left without much information. And the role of the secretary really at that point was to perhaps get in more information to the stakeholders and keep the board and management glued together. We found a situation where when the lockdown came down, a lot of boards, postponed their board meetings, they postponed their AGMs, and management were left to tackle the crisis on their own. So it is critical that we actually look at the sustainability reporting, where we look at the financial capital, the human capital, and the physical capital in terms of just making the numbers make sense. In terms of the Act, you find that it stipulates the requirements that the company secretary, as a governance champion, would need to have. We do have the Public and Entities Governance Act that looks after the public sector, that forces the public entities to be able to toe the lines of corporate governance. And this company secretary then becomes paramount because he plays a fulcrum role in that area. You have also the ZSC new listing rules that stipulates the sustainability reporting. That also requires the company secretary to make sure that all the companies are actually adhering to those legal compliance and rules that we actually have. For other private companies, we do have the National Code of Conduct, and although it's not compulsory, you'll find that it actually gives direction in terms of how companies and corporates should behave in terms of corporate governance. So the role of the corporate secretary has become more of a governance champion, and certainly from our perspective as an institute of governance, we seem to be seeing that we'll be playing a critical role in terms of going forward. I mean, just give you a synopsis of the future roles of the company secretary. And I mean, you understand that in the new normal, obviously, some of the responsibilities have been expanded to include, among other things, managing the virtual environment and making sure that the boards are educated in terms of the new high-tech. We have been leapfrogged 10 years into the future in terms of technology, and also in terms of just needing to challenge boardroom practices and behaviors in terms of risk management, compliance, and other things. I think it's critical at this stage that the corporate secretary should be able to synthesize the information that he passes to the board. Gone are the days where we just funnel raw data. He must actually have, decision-ready data so that the board are able to make fast and quick decisions and be able to prepare for future crises. And in a nutshell, the position of a corporate secretary has become so strategic and critical to the extent that I think it is important that if we can get a framework internationally that then guides, corporate secretaryship in all jurisdictions, we'll have best practices that will actually add value to our stakeholders in general.
Okay, perfect. Now moving forward, and I would go to Edo De Wette. Its question to you is, what new threat and opportunity would characterize the business landscape in the coming years, and how should the corporate secretary prepare for it? What is the suggestion for roadmap ahead for the profession of governance professionals?
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think the main threat and also the opportunity, I think the ever-growing amount of governance content which can be used to for the decision-making process of the board. I think the central question for the company secretary will be, how do I get the right information at the right time, at the right moment, in the right way, in the boardroom table or at the boardroom table? I think in Holland it's for 80% written content, written governance content. I think, in my opinion, the opportunity lies in video. I think video will be king also in the boardroom, because video will give you the opportunity to create new perspectives for the boardroom and for decision-making processes. Well, it's easily said, video, but how can you manage to get video perspectives in the boardroom? And that will, I think most of the company secretaries will have to prepare themselves with education and training. But not the traditional training, it will be skills training. 21st century skills training like critical thinking, creativity, but also video content creation and even media wisdom. I think that was on the one side the threat, but also an opportunity, a completely new direction for the role of the company secretary. The second question, is there a roadmap? I don't know. I don't know if there's a roadmap. I think it's a tailor-made approach for every company secretary, for every organization. And maybe there is a role for the Chartered Secretary Institution to facilitate that. I don't know. That's not my expertise. But I don't think there is a roadmap but for everyone. I think it's custom-made. It has to be made custom-made. That's what I think the main threat and opportunity for a company secretary.
One question has came just now, and it is saying that many jurisdiction corporate governance audit and even secretarial audit is carried out by the governance professional company secretaries, which is made mandatory by the legislature. So how do you strengthen corporate governance audit, and how important it is for the how important this is, and what is the scenario in a different jurisdiction? So I will go first to board, and thereafter Murli, because India it is mandatory to have the corporate governance certificate also, and corporate secretarial audit also. So first Bode, and thereafter quickly just 1 minute answer I would be requiring on this.
So from my side, in order to strengthen this role, at least to assist corporate and company secretaries to carry out corporate governance audit, it is through capacity building program on corporate governance audit. Let me also be transparent here. Corporate governance audit was introduced just in 2018 National Code, so it's relatively new in Nigeria. And because it is new, what the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria is doing currently is organizing capacity building program for our members in such a way that they will be in a position to know the scope, the responsibilities, and what they are expected to do when they are conducting the corporate governance audit. Apart from that, since corporate governance is evolving, refresher trainings must be organized from time to time, and our institute will be doing that, and I encourage all institutes to do that. In addition to that, it's more of networking by all the corporate governance institutes. Networking in the sense that there are some jurisdictions where corporate governance audit has been entrenched for some time, so they will have something to offer to other jurisdictions where it's just starting. So comparative analysis to know what is being done in other countries, and in order to bring those ideas locally, in order to enhance whatever we are doing locally. Apart from that, and I will encourage institutes and governance practitioners to partner with regulatory authorities when they are developing a template for reporting on corporate governance. Because corporate governance audit, the regulators are now coming up with the template that will be used. If institutes are participating in it, definitely that will give them an edge in order to strengthen corporate governance audit. In Nigeria, the Financial Reporting Council just released the template for corporate governance reporting, and the Institute of Chartered Secretaries was invited to make input. So it's a way to go. That when these templates are being developed, I will encourage all institutes and all professionals to get involved and make their comments so that they can shape the development and also the evolution of corporate governance audit. That would be in brief what I will say.
Yes, Murli, quickly, 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks. I think the only thing I can add that we know it's already a regulatory thing. But the experience, I think, has been, as I said, it's a huge assurance for the company and for the company secretary also in terms of, and when we have such a plethora of compliances and issues to be done, independent professional looking at it always is a great assurance, and I think that has been supported by the institute providing guidelines for secretarial audit, and I'm sure as we go, we will have systems more. I know there is peer group, peer review coming in of the secretarial reports as well. so that all these are to make it more and more robust and true assurance for the company. Thank you.
So, last question I am going to have with Elzbe and Nandita both, and I think I'll request first to Elzbe to respond. That new comprehensive governance framework has augmented need of the skilled corporate secretaries, and basic skills need to possess. As their role is now evolving in the some most strategic one, how important it is for the professionally qualified company secretaries specifically designed for require expertise and knowledge, and how do you suggest corporate secretaries to brace up for their need for continual professional development, key skill sets required while hiring a corporate secretary by the corporate, and why it is necessary for them? So you start first, and thereafter Nandita may supplement.
Thank you, Ranjit. Yeah, it's a mouthful, and I'll try and answer it as succinctly as possible. I think it is every company secretary's responsibility to increase their levels of knowledge on a permanent basis. Continuing professional development is important. The baseline of a company secretary qualification, whether it's the ICSA qualification in South Africa or a law degree or whatever it may be, that just gives you the baseline. I think from there you need to ensure that you stay on top of international developments through an organization such as this, that we are all here today as part of this webinar. Reading from the various professional services firms out there. They often submit articles which are thought-leading, understanding where governance is going in your country, understanding the governance codes and potential developments on that. So I think it's a huge task on the individual company secretary to just make sure that they stay on top of their game. And they need to be very much aware of what is going on, not just in corporate governance, but also in their own industry. So you can't just sit back and say, because I know corporate governance, that's the only thing. You need to be aware of the developments in your industry and in your wider country. E-skills, true. It's a very difficult role. I often struggle to talk to my human capital colleagues about when we recruit about what exactly I'm looking for, because the true and intelligent good company secretary is few and far between. You need to really find somebody who can be comfortable on the one hand with doing something mundane as minute taking, but also then move directly into advising the board and stopping the board meeting at the correct place to ensure that the necessary corporate governance steps are taken. So it's all about the personality, I think, and not necessarily all about knowledge.
Nandita. Yes, Nandita.
Yes, thank you, Ranjit. I'll try to make it as brief as possible. When we are talking about professional qualification, I must say that I cannot divorce myself from the fact that before I took over this position here in MITSA as the CEO, I was actually lecturing part-time in some of the local universities here, teaching students who are going to be potential company secretaries. And I know that for a fact that it's very essential that in the qualification itself, because of the ways that the fast developing situation with the corporate governance that we are facing today, one way of circumventing this issue of not having enough qualification for the students is to make sure that the programs itself are designed to take into account the strategic role of the company secretary in today's corporate world. So therefore, knowledge and skill sets, they must be incorporated together. Just having the knowledge alone is not going to be enough anymore in today's world. The skill sets must also be incorporated into the programs itself. And I would like to see that happening quite fast, because, we are really evolving into a situation where corporate governance is taking over in a very, very fast pace. Now, of course, over and over the qualification that we are giving to the company secretaries, it is important that they keep themselves abreast with the current developments and that they could do with the CPD requirements that we expect our company secretaries to have. Now, how to brace up to the needs for continued professional development? You can perhaps do it by way of code of ethics. I think the code of ethics that each respective company secretarial association has, that you could use in many ways to actually embed it and emphasize that the requirement for the company secretary to strive for professional competency. Of course, I talked about the regulatory requirement for CPD hours, which is very important. And key skill sets to look for while hiring. Well, I would look for someone with integrity, someone who has got transparency, who has got the team working skills, in-depth knowledge of the Companies Act, of course, and the listing requirements, other regulatory acts, laws, guidelines. This full spectrum is very important. Attention to detail. I think that is a very important aspect as a company secretary. I think I have seen it in my life as well, having worked as a company secretary for almost 38 years. The attention to detail and a well-organized approach to work is important, essential rather. Ability to prioritize your work well, especially under pressure. Something I would look for. Good command of the written and spoken English language. Well, I have to say English is here to stay, and you have to know the language in order to enhance your interpersonal skills. Of course, knowing the language of the land is of course very important as well. And this can actually take you a long way in your ability to work with people at all levels. And one more thing that we have to look into, with digitization as it comes today, computer literacy is a very important skill where company secretary is concerned. And I think I shall end here. I can see Ranjit looking very anxiously at me. Thank you, Ranjit. I will stop here.
I think last point, and in fact last line you have spoke about the digital literacy. There are many questions which has came on the technology part, that technology is emerging area and it is need to have the, say, company secretaries are required to abreast with the technology. So I think request to Karen that one more webinar can be organized because time is short today and we are going to wrap up. So two questions which has came at the very end, fag end, and which can be taken up in the next webinar. And these two questions are very, very important question. One is, what is the common area and recognize basic competency from the basis of inter-country arrangements or inter-institutional arrangement, so that internationally accepted practices can be adopted, such as arbitration, contract management, and litigation. So if it is possible for one jurisdiction professional to go into the other jurisdiction and practice these areas, so can it be devised? So I think a separate webinar can be organized on this particular topic, that how to, say, establish a global practice of yourself on, say, commonly accepted area by the governance professional. And now, see, boundaries are meaningless. And in the digital era or internet era, services can be delivered sitting at home, and working from home concept in the COVID era is now new normal, everybody knows. So working from the country is also can be done. So let's discuss this particular topic, Karen, in next webinar of CSIA. And another thing is focus on the technology part, that how company secretaries should abreast themselves for the latest technology, and technology, how it is going to be the new normal in the boardroom and compliance management.